Hi, Amar. How are you today? It's so
I'm
wonderful to see you.
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for
Likewise.
coming on to the Everyday Mystic. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So am I.
Yeah, great. Well, we have, a little bit of history. Amar and I met in the Austin area. He had just moved there from Canada, and I had just moved there from all the various places I was before I got to the Austin area. And in our first meeting, I felt a kinship and a kindred connection. Even though we were
Mm,
meeting to talk about business, I still felt, I felt a deeper connection even as we spoke about business. So I'm so happy that you're coming
mm.
on to the podcast. We didn't talk in our time together in the Austin area. We never really spoke about spirituality, but I guess it's that kindred feeling that I had with you. And when I listened to you on another podcast, I heard you speak about it, and I was like, ooh, okay, let's have him on. Let's get into it and talk a bit about the spiritual journey and what that's been like for you and how it informs your life. So you want to go back a little bit and share with us maybe if you had an awakening of sorts or if it's just always been part of your life.
Yeah, interesting. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. Really privileged. And yeah, I think the commonplace between us was we came from a similar background. We're coming from the same place, and so there's a familiarity when you meet someone, even if you speak about something else. Um, so with respect to your question, spirituality, just as a term, has as a way of life, has always been part of my existence. But what I've learned, or what I've experienced over the last few decades, is that people go in and out of it. And for me, spirituality is kind of well defined. Um, for me, spirituality is an intellectual ascension into spirituality. But intellectualism cannot be by itself. An intellectual arrival at spirituality has to be coupled with emotion, because without heart, you can't have spirituality. And so for me, the intellect is a big part of it. And without it, I'm just not able to make that connection or make that alignment. And so that has been a big journey for me. And that's been the huge journey of going in and out, and continuing that ascension and continuing that learning, both cultivating the intellectual part, and we can dive into that, and cultivating the emotional part, which is probably the hardest for me, for a person who comes from the brain or the mind, if you will.
Absolutely. Yeah, that mind body connection is always there. But if we spend so much time just in one of those places, it can be hard to feel that connection that we're actually this mind
100%.
body spirit being. And to me, it is a great reminder, or I guess it's just part of what the practices are all about, is that reintegration of mind, body, spirit into one and into a wholeness that it is
Absolutely.
already, but it's just kind of like recognizing that again and coming back to that. So you spend a lot of time in your mind. You're an entrepreneur. You used to work on Wall Street. You are approaching spirituality even from an intellectual standpoint, you're saying. So you spend a lot
Mhm.
of time there. What is it, I guess, from what are you intellectualizing when it comes to spirituality?
Great question. Um, so the difference between people who don't intellectualize it, end up blindly following. So let's cut to the chase. I believe in a divine. I believe in an infinite power, a creator of the universe. And that is where the connection is, right? How do we connect to this infinite power? Um, a lot of people I've met, and I'm sure you have too, the connection is with the heart and solely with the heart. For me, and probably likely for you too, though I don't make any assumptions, um, because I've always lived in the head, it's always been, well, what's the logic? How do I know? And these are questions that I always ask myself. And so, when you're born in a family which embodies um, a spiritual upbringing, and I'll leave it loose like that for now. Um, Sometimes it just descends on you that you just have to be this way. But for a person like me who needs to intellectualize it and say, well, why? Why? What is it? Why are we here? What am I doing here? And what's the point? And for me, it was, well, we're going to die. We all die at the end of the day. And, is this what life is? Is this all that life has to offer? And so when we kind of cut through all of that and get all the way to the end point, it's like, it's not worth it. So I went through that for the better part of my life. And the early period all the way through university. And it just wasn't worth it. And I'm not going to say I was clinically depressed, but I certainly didn't have purpose. I was just basically doing what my parents had asked me to do. Oh, you better, go out and become a doctor or a lawyer and earn for your family, and this is what your lot in life is. And that's all well and good, but eventually, very quickly, I found out that I needed to have some sort of purpose, and that's where you that's where you become the outcast. Like, what do you mean, you need to have some purpose? And so that's been my struggle. My struggle has been not necessarily intellectualizing it, but intellectualizing it to a certain point where I feel satisfied that, wow, yes, there is a divine presence. There is an infinite power beyond this. There is something that's going to happen after that line. And so then I set out to find that connection. And so again, you're moving from the intellectual to the emotional or to the heart, which is actually the most difficult part. And I don't think it ever ends. I think that heart part um, is always going to be something that is asymptotic. It just never, you just keep unpacking and unpacking and unpacking. And so that's shown up in my life quite a bit. And that is how I lead my life now,
What were
especially
the
as an entrepreneur.
what were the proof points for you logically that said, okay, this is something. There is a divine, I am the divine. There is something after. Like, what did it take for you to believe that?
Yeah, a lot of things. It's not just one thing. Um, the whole philosophical argument about dependency. Absolutely everything in this world is dependent on something else. So if you think about us humans, we're dependent on our mothers giving birth. If you think about a table that is in front of you, it is dependent on somebody making it. Well, then you peel away, well, where did the table come from? It came from the wood. Somebody had to plant that tree. Well, where did that how did that tree get planted? And when you keep going, you eventually come to a point where if everything is dependent all the way back to that first cell, or even before that, the Big Bang, how can there be a nothing? And so that was the conundrum that I faced. And to me, this one dependent argument, and then when you look at, because when you look at the world, I see the world in systems. And this is a big part of my story today, and how I've developed a mental model around food and soil, coming from a Wall Street background. When you look at the world today, I see harmony. I see harmony in the various systems that are out there. I see harmony in the solar system. It's perfect. I see harmony in the ecosystem. It's perfect when you leave it alone. When men come in and intervene, it becomes toxic, and it goes off the tracks. And so for me, those were, again, I'm just touching, we're going to need hours to talk about this, but I'm just touching sort of the thimble here, um, of how I see the world around me and its divine and the divine presence in it. There's more. And then you say, okay, well, and you can ask the question, but you say, okay, well, if there's divine presence, what do you do next? And that has been the big thing is what, okay, so great. There's divine presence. There's us, meaning humans, who are very different from any other biological sentient being that's out there. What is it that we're asked to do? And that is another journey. And that's a pursuit of all humans, actually. So yeah, we can dive into that too.
When you were in this intellectual phase, and I'm not saying you're out of that now because we're always in and out of the, mind, body, heart, soul spaces. But when you were in this proof phase of logic and
Hmm.
looking at spirituality through that lens, were there specific uh, philosophies, systems, teachers that you studied that were powerful for you?
Yeah, so growing up um, in a in a semi, I guess a religious household, I knew about religion, but it didn't grab me the way that I wanted to be, at least in the way, insofar as it has how it was taught to me. And so that was the journey that I began. There was a philosophical journey where you philosophize about things like dependency and the clock argument. You're walking in a desert and you find a clock or a watch, and you pick it up and you say, "Oh, this had to have a maker." And so when you're walking in life and you look at the clock of the solar system, you cannot help but say that's much more complex than a mere watch. And so the philosophical argument is, so I'm not going to dive into this because there's equal number, well, I wouldn't say equal number, just as many people who pose these arguments, these philosophical arguments, there's also people who oppose it and break it down. Um, I I don't indulge in deep philosophical discussions because it's just mental gymnastics. At the end of the day, what you have to do is that's when you begin to bring your heart into the picture. And you say, okay, well, does this make sense? And does it jive with me? And it's not going to jive up here because if they keep you in the intellect, if they keep you up here in your head, you'll never come to an answer. But if you allow yourself to descend, or I should say, ascend into your heart, which is really the real brain, and is being proven scientifically too, um, that's where you can start to use your instincts to kind of help guide you.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, there were philosophical discussions that are academic, and then there are others where there are messages that have been sent to you in religion. And I don't like to use the word religion because I think it brings in a whole connotation and it isolates people. I'm going to call it a way of life. So I view what we're doing as a way of life, and I sought, what is religion? Basically 99% of the people believe in some sort of a religion. Well, what was that? And so that began a journey of saying, oh, what is Buddhism? What is Hinduism? What is Islam? What's Christianity? What are the messages in there? And so that was also something that informed me a great deal about what walk of life or what path I was going to traverse.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have similar histories in that because I too was not, I wasn't raised with a ton of religious dogma. Even though
Hmm.
our family went to church for holidays, we didn't practice Christianity. We didn't practice these religious tenets. But I felt a connection even in my time in that church. I joined the youth choir, and I joined, part of the youth group, and there was a powerful sense of connection to something greater. And I didn't know what that was at the
Mm.
time. I called it God, and certainly everybody within that church called it God.
Yep.
And then I set out to seek what that was for myself too. So similarly studied all different types of religions and the philosophies and the ancient traditions to see, what is it in here that is this feeling that I have, this connective
Mm.
thread. And am I part of this? Am I not part of this? It took me a long time to get back to calling it God, to be honest, because I was so, uh, God obviously has a strong, Judeo-Christian uh, connotation to it. But whatever we
Yes.
call it, God, the divine, the creator, this all that is. To me, it is all the same. And it is, as you look through these different religions, it really is all the same thing that's being described and that we're being sort of ushered toward, and just different practices and pathways to get there. Uh, when I discovered that, it all made sense. I was like, oh, okay, this is just like science, where we're just using these arguments to describe the indescribable, to
Hmm.
try to make sense of what's going on around us. Science gets super precise about it, but even that can change, right? Like this hardcore um,
Right.
law. And then they're like, well, actually, it may not be that. Or we're basing this on something else that's a lot of theory. And it's all very uh, ethereal in the end.
And
And it isn't,
it's
like you said, the heart of it, which is the real true connection to it all, right?
absolutely. And it came down to resilience. It came down to, okay, well, so then studying this and rationalizing it and using logic and going through those arguments or that reflection. Um, you want certainty because if you're going to put your life behind something, you absolutely want certainty behind it. I'm going to give my life for a purpose, and I'm going to direct my entire sense of existence, my entire sense of being towards something. And it better be right. I better be darn sure that this is the right path. And so I believe I'm on the right path, but the connection is always something, the heart connection is always something that because it's not in front of us, because we know it's infinite, because we know there's something well beyond our comprehension. There's no way that us mere humans can truly understand what the infinite truly is.
Hmm.
And so that's fun.
Hmm.
That's that is something worthy of living for. That makes it that makes it okay. I'm going to pursue this. And of course, I'm not sitting here in a monastery or a mosque and saying, well, I'm going to sit in a corner and that's all I'm going to pursue. Because we are put on earth and there has to be some purpose behind it. And so you have to marry the practicality or the practicalness of being on earth, existing for a few decades, and the spirituality and marry the two. So not one. So I come from a Wall Street background. I think you come from a corporate background too, advertising, marketing. Um, and that's one bookend. And then the other bookend is sitting in a corner in a mosque or a monastery. But I think there's a marriage. Obviously, I don't think, I believe, I do think that there's a marriage between the two, and leading life and doing everything, whether it's in the entrepreneurial, the startup that I'm running, or whatever that we're doing. So
Yeah.
that marriage has to occur. Um, but so it's the intellectual with the emotional marriage, and then the next step is moral. So there's a moral quotient attached to it that's the driver behind, how we stay on the right path, if you will, how we stay on a path of purpose that matters. Because everybody can have purpose. I can be a financial analyst or I can be a banker and be usurious and say, I'm intellectually and spiritually aligned and I think I'm doing really good work, yet I'm treating my clients and usuriously taking money from them. And it's not good for them, it's not good for society. So everything has to be aligned, and that's where morality begins to come in. Well, it comes in very quickly. It's like, okay, well, what is right? What is and it's not just about right, it's about harmony. So if the systems around us, if the God made ecosystems and the solar systems and the biological systems and the human bodily systems, these are all perfect and they're all working there. How are we going to contribute in such a way that is harmonious to all of these systems that are around us?
Mhm.
And so that's where it's a building block
Mhm.
of all of these thoughts or
Yeah.
quotients, if you will.
Yeah. And that's how we can learn from nature and from, spending time observing these natural ecosystems or the solar system if you happen to like to observe space, but to look at the perfection in these systems and
Yeah,
see that harmony, see that unity, see how it's all working together and flowing with one another, and knowing that we too are not only part of that, but then as we work with the other humans, if we try to do that in a bubble or we try to do that outside of the harmony of the system, that's where
exactly.
things start to really break down. Yeah, I heard Gabor Mate. Do you know who that is?
Yes, I do.
I heard him speak on a video saying how, someone's individual trauma
Yeah.
is a societal problem. It's not just that person and the perpetrator, let's say, because that
Mm,
perpetrator comes from a specific culture and a specific time and
exactly.
place that's there might have been war going on, there might have, pestilence, there might have been, or whatever, or even just the generational trauma that that person experienced, right? So it's all connected. It's not that we,
Absolutely.
right, we cannot exist outside of that connectedness. And I believe spirituality or the mystical path is really connecting us to even greater, the greater energy of all that is, that we are here connected with one another. And then you throw in the energy of all that is and all the beings or spirits and that have existed in all time, and being and opening ourselves up to the connectedness of that, so that we
That's
aren't
right.
just your living in this existence of just this human in this life right now, that we are
Exactly.
soul connected on a much greater journey.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It's and I overuse the word harmony a lot. And then you develop mental models around it. And a mental model, if you realize that you've developed a mental model, it can be very powerful. I'm not biologically like I'm a finance guy. I'm a marketing and finance guy. That's what I studied in at university, and then I studied operations, and I went to Wall Street. I spent 15 years on Wall Street, and I didn't see harmony there. and I couldn't figure out what was wrong.
Mm,
I couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting behind it.
mm,
Why was I not? I spent a godly 15 years on Wall Street, and it wasn't until my separation that I realized that I don't need to be here anymore.
mhm,
All of a sudden, I have that choice, and I don't need to be here. And because I didn't have the answers, the only answer I had was two children that needed me, and I knew that that was the right thing to do. And so that was the excuse for me to kind of quit. And I'm veering off a little bit, but it's sometimes it's a building block. You don't
mhm,
have the answers. You want it, and but you do know you know what truth is,
mhm,
and that is probably the highest pursuit.
mhm,
I was actually going to mention this in another way, but that is, a lot of people say, if I may, um, um, a lot of people ask me if I'm, and I've been asked many times if I'm happy. On the face of it, I may not look happy because I'm radically focused on my product, trying to bring that to market, and it's a hard journey. I will not pull any punches. It's very hard. The life that I'm living right now without my children, they're up in Toronto. It's very hard to do that. They're older, so it's fine, but it's very hard. Um, and people ask if I'm happy, and I actually don't know how to respond to that. And now I know why I don't know how to respond to that. And I don't think I've ever been happy, but I don't think that's the right question. I think probably the right answer is I'm joyful. I have joy. I'm content is what I generally say. And I think a lot of people ask that question in society quite a bit,
mhm,
and it's the lowest form of pursuit to pursue happiness. Now I know we know what it means. Happiness could be I gave you an iPhone and you became happy, or I bought you a car or a gift and you became happy. But that happiness is fleeting, and and what it leads to is if I go through the steps, and I'm happy to go through the steps. There's happiness is the lowest form of pursuit for a human being, and the highest form of pursuit, and there's a whole bunch of pursuits in between: fame, wealth, power, um, excellence, impact. They're all ephemeral, they're all temporary, and they're all for this earth. The journey, it's a journey where the journey is not the destination. And so after peeling away that, I feel that the highest form of pursuit, as opposed to happiness, is truth, is to seek truth. It'll never end, it'll always continue. And so that's sort of been my new mantra. And, of course, I'm pursuing impact, but the impact is in the form of being of service to humans because of what I believe to be true, if
mhm,
if that made any sense.
mhm. Right, yeah. So it's like truth is your North Star. It's that lighthouse that
Yes.
you're going towards, and then everything you do can point to that. And you can use that as, a moral compass, as you were saying earlier, bringing morality into things, that you have something that guides. It is this pursuit of truth, and or you have something to measure against. Like, oh, does this feel true to me? And you can say, oh, is this pursuit towards my truthfulness or truthiness or whatever you want to say?
Hmm.
So I see that as being a beautiful way to both have your something that you're moving towards, and also something that you can measure against always. Whereas, yeah, all of those other types of, as you called them, fleeting, whether it's
Pursuits.
validation, yeah, fleeting pursuits, fleeting moments in time, can still be experienced. But it's when we start to see that as the end point, right?
Exactly.
That's when we start to
Exactly.
run into trouble. Like, oh, I thought that was like the ultimate pinnacle of my
Yeah,
life, that I would
yeah,
reach this level of wealth. And then there's a lot of disappointment on the other side of that, where people are
that's
like,
right.
oh shit, no, like I am worse off maybe, or certainly not where I thought I might be in this like enlightened truth. So yeah, it is a journey of both unfolding into that, realizing that those things aren't going to necessarily be the end point, and then realizing maybe there isn't an end, that we are
Right,
just continually unfolding, and through it experiencing all things, disappointments and satisfaction, happiness and fear, and joy and pain, and we get to have this like very full experience of what life is. And
absolutely.
yeah, and I think that is more the purpose of our lives than
That's
it
right.
is, reaching one thing and then being like, I did it. I made it to this one
That's right.
destination. It's like, well, you're not done. We're never
That's
done.
right. That's right.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And I like
Exactly.
what you said earlier about, you know, well, one, going back to like your time on Wall Street, and you didn't see or feel or experience harmony there. And there's a lot of things, I think, as humans that we can do to uh, that are out of harmony, that are in disharmony. And we can feel that, when you tune in to
Mm,
person, a system like Wall Street, any type of construct that we have created as human beings, we can tune into that and feel whether or not this feels harmonious. Basically, does it feel right or wrong? Right. And
that's
you
right.
feel into that. But it can be a pursuit in and of itself to get to this point of where we can actually feel that. Some people feel it because it's directly impacting their joy, or their health, or their own harmony. But some people don't even know what that means to be in and out of harmony. So getting in, even in just calibrated to harmony, I think is an important pursuit of our time here, that we
That's
are
right.
understanding how to tune in to ourselves and really feel like, is this harmonious or not?
That's right.
What do you do on a regular basis to tune up your tuner in that way, to feel
Hmm.
that or not feel that?
Yeah. 100%. It's not magic. It's not going to come out of thin air. There is going to be a need um, to go to what you know to be true, or what you know to be truth. And I think one has to continue to search for that. And so, in the search for truth, um, I found solace in the Quran, in the book. And it's a message that has started from the beginning of man, from when man descended on earth up till now. And there's a way to, you know, rely on something like that. And when you put your entire sense, when you put your entire, sorry, when you put your entire life on something, you have to know for sure that it's the truth that you're getting behind. And then the pursuit of truth is something that, again, as I mentioned, it never stops, and at least insofar as your connection to the divine.
Mhm. So do you have then daily practices and things that you'll do, whether you're um, tied to the Quran, and that those teachings, and other things that you do to stay connected to the divine, but also, really stay tuned into your own. I like to kind of picture it like we are clearing our vessel that we are keeping our vessel tuned
Yes.
to the universe or to God so that we can sense what is right and wrong, harmony, disharmony, all of those things. So, what are some of the things that you do uh, on a regular basis to be in that state?
Hmm. I spend a lot of time with myself. Now, as a founder, it's almost a de facto that you spend time with yourself. It's almost it's part of your life to spend time with yourself. But of course, there's the pursuit of the startup and trying to get that through. So that's the part of the ephemeral world, but it's part of the purpose that aligns with spirituality, emotional well-being, moral quotient. Um, and the hardest part, or the scariest part, I admit it's scary, is when I'm trying to access my heart. And I'm trying to open up the heart so that it can connect to the divine. And I do that through immersing myself in perfection. And one of them is perhaps taking a walk, taking a hike in the woods, and remarking to oneself and looking around and opening, having your eyes open. Another is the practice of the Quran. The Quran or any book that I read have to be perfect. If it's going to be from a divine source, then we owe it to ourselves to find, well, did the divine send a message? Did the divine, um, does the divine want to be known? And of course, the divine wants to be known. It's obvious. He's created these systems around us uh, for us to, for us to, reflect. And so I do that a lot. I'll sit and I'll think about my life. And one way that I ground myself is I think about my end, my own ephemeral end. And I keep asking myself, am I doing the right thing? Or am I doing everything that this vessel or this body has been given? And of course, I have health, I have education, I have experience, I have the ability to speak, with articulation. All of these are beautiful gifts that not everybody has.
Hmm.
And so I take stock of those and say, okay, well, if I've been given all of this, then I must do something with it. And so that's sort of the compass, and it's a check-in. It's a check-in for me. Whether I do it every day, I cannot say that I do it every day necessarily, but I check in. And when I do it, I feel better when I wake up in the morning, and I feel a sense of new renewal. So there's a short death, if you will, that one goes through when one sleeps. And then when you wake up, there's a renewal to relive the next day as your best self.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I think I've been toying with starting a group called Hearts Club. Yeah, it's something fashioned behind the Dead Poets Society,
Hmm.
but strictly poetry or readings about the heart and accessing the hollow of the heart and understanding, well, what is this thing that sort of sits tilted in our chest? And so it's fascinating to me. And I want to spend more time at it. I'm longing to spend more time at it. I'm excited to spend more time with my heart and with other people who connect, who themselves are interested in, accessing it. So there's things that you do by yourself, and then there's things that you do by surrounding yourself with people who are on a similar path.
Hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful reflection time that you're spending, spending time reflecting on why are we here? You brought that up earlier, that original question of why am I here? What is this all about? And to
That's
actually
right.
sit and spend time, you could contemplate that question, your entire life and come up with
Yeah.
different forms of an answer that all make up one kind of big answer. It's a beautiful thing to contemplate. And I love that you brought up contemplating your death, because that is a practice that a lot of people are very, I think there's a divide, right? But in either the spiritual space, or even, the what we'll call the new age spiritual space of positive thinking and law of affirmation, and these other types of, what, I lump them into spiritual pursuits, but they are, not typically tied to ancient traditions and religious dogma in any way. Not that
Right.
any one is either right or wrong, just new methods and practices and things. But there tends to be within that camp of the positive thinking side of things that everything always has to be positive, that we can't ever reflect on
Right.
this, what people would deem negative. And I think that's just the distinction that we need to make there, that thinking about death isn't negative. Death is a beautiful experience of our human form that ascends us to the next
That's
place
right.
as a soul form. And what a amazing thing to use as another lighthouse for you, right? Another thing that we can look at and go, am I living every day to its fullest?
That's right.
Am I living in pursuit of my own purpose and meaning? Is this living what I want to be remembered by at that death,
That's right.
right? So it's a
That's right.
fantastic uh, use of time and reflection. I love that you mentioned that. And, going back to just the whole thing as a set of practices, this, what will we just deem spirituality, but, it could be just living from the seat of your soul here in this
Mm.
body. Or I like to think of it as living as an energetic being, because we are all of these things: the mind, the body, the heart, the spirit, but all of it is energy. And
It is energy. Yeah.
right. And so when we experience ourselves as an energetic being, we have more, I guess I just see it as having more flow between all of those things, that there's no
Hmm.
separation between any of those aspects of ourself, that we're just this one energetic being that'll eventually move into a different energetic form somewhere. Maybe it's off planet. Maybe it's not back here on Earth. Maybe it's in the ethers somewhere. Who
Yeah.
knows, right? But to
Yeah.
see ourselves that way and live that way, it's a way of life. So, everything you've talked about, I see as just a way. Some people, like to say, oh, their religion is the way, but all of these things are a way
Right.
of living. And then those other things that we do here, build businesses, work on Wall Street, become a father, do whatever, are our actions and our doings here. And we can bring any of those ways into all of that. So it sounds like you have really brought all of the ways and the practices of experiencing yourself as a spiritual being and as energy in this form into your parenting, into the decisions you make of where you're going to live and be and who you're going to surround yourself with, and into certainly the buildings and the building of this company. And that is the, when you start to bring it all together in that way, then it's like, ooh, major harmony going on, because it's all like spinning
Right.
together, rather than like, oh, this thing's spinning
Right.
over here and this thing's spinning over there. I picture it like,
Right.
you try to get all the plates up, right, and spin them
Right.
and run over here and spin them. It's like, well, if you're just spinning one big plate, one big thing
Right.
that's all things together in your life, isn't that just much easier?
Right. Yeah. I feel lucky that I've been able to figure this out. And I'm not saying that I figured it out. There's nobody really knows. You can just go with the odds and the probabilities and go along that path. And the world speaks. If you're doing something that's when I was on Wall Street, people look at, but other people look at you and say, wow, there's jealousy and envy. And that is not, that means you're in disharmony, even though you may be happy, if you will. So absolutely, I feel very lucky that I've had the ability to be self-critical and to, um, I definitely don't get it all right
Mhm.
all the time. And part of making mistakes is part of that journey
Mhm.
and learning from it, and being open to the criticism.
Yeah.
And I surround myself by people who are better than me, who can teach me. And that's probably what is saving me from not completely crashing.
Mm.
I've gone through my crashes, but it's when you surround yourself by people who are better than you and who will call you to the carpet, which is what I want.
Mhm.
Because you know there's not a lot of life here, and we need to get up and hurry up and start living and doing something with it before it ends.
So true. Thank you so much, my friend. This has been a lovely time with you.
Thank you.
We'll have to catch up again some more and maybe even bring you back on again to talk about the as your company, Mod Garden, really gets off the ground and takes its next steps and stages. Anything you want to leave the audience with today?
Um, yeah, I would start with the end. I mentioned this earlier. I think that's very grounding. Start with the end in mind, and then figure out what. So the visual that I've set up for myself is I'm lying on my deathbed, and I glance over my life, and I ask myself one question: did I do absolutely everything in my God-given power to make a difference?
Amazing. Thank you, Amar.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, that's so juicy. I love that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so, so good. The